And welcome to StackHunters. I'm your host, Bradley Stalder. I'm also here with co-host Dan Williamson and special guest tonight, Jim Coventry from RotoWire, also a host at SiriusXM and Kings Classic Fantasy Football champion. Jim, it's an absolute pleasure having you on, and of course, connecting with you yet again after the Fantasy Football Expo. You know, the last couple of years, it's been great just hanging out. It's awesome at the Expo, right?
100%. If you haven't been there, you need to go because you can meet all kinds of great people, talk football, talk life, and make some really good friends. Don't miss it.
Dan, how are you doing on this fine Thursday? Pie Day, March 14th. I had to make sure. Yeah. We had pies today. We had pies today at school. So for those who don't know, like I'm a high school administrator, and but I'm a math teacher by trade. And so I have to infuse math love in my high school. So we were dishing out pies to parents in the drive line as students were walking out. So Dan, how are you doing during this fine pie day?
I am doing excellent. And the best part about it is that, you know, no longer being in the restaurant business, and we did a lot of pies. So Pie Day was a huge day. Not going to miss it. Not going to miss it.
Not going to miss it. Well, we might have missed some things with all of the free agency frenzy that's been happening over the last couple of days. It's been hard to keep up with refreshing our phones. And I feel bad for all of the NFL reporters who are like, is this real? Per sources, there's the rumors. I hear the rumblings. Jim, before we get into the actual free agency, what are your and Dan perspectives of how to, as content creators, trying to keep up with all of the news? What is your perspective on when it happens as crazy of a time as now?
You know, it's all about preparation like everything else, right? Before free agency, comprehensive notes on every player. And I have those in a doc. When a player goes to a new team, you know, I copy and paste the notes to my other spots in the doc. I have a running chart of players' losses and additions per team, and I continue to monitor those. So realistically, that legwork up front, it really allows you to process free agency and to not get overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, probably a little less intense on it than Jim, but you know, what I do is I go through all 32 teams before free agency, you know, after the Super Bowl, and I just start looking at salary cap situations, who's got you know, expiring contracts, who has very cuttable contracts, all that kind of stuff. So I can kind of start to map out even before free agency happens what I think is likely to happen in free agency. And I think we got ourselves a doozy of a free agency period this time. I thought it was a lot more fun than any I've seen in many, many years past.
Yeah, it's certainly been a lot of fun. We got a lot of in season, the first wave was running backs, and then we got a little bit of quarterback news sprinkled in. And recently, over the last 36 hours or so, the wide receivers have been taking the cake. But before we get into the specifics, let's dive into the Kansas City Chiefs, for instance. They've gotten under the cap through restructuring Patrick Mahomes, right? And that was $20 million of restructuring with a guy who signed $500 million contract just a few years ago. Do we see them making any more big free agent splashes? Obviously, you know, T. Higgins is an unlikely scenario, but it's a fun topic to talk about. Are there any targets that you think, Jim or Dan, that you want the Kansas City Chiefs to go after to try to three-peat?
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was salivating over two prospects. One was Darnell Mooney, and the other one, probably even more so, was Curtis Samuel. Both of those would have been so fun in Kansas City. I'm not disappointed at all where Mooney ended up. Curtis Samuel, I'm sure we'll get to him, but yeah. So it's, you know, it's starting to get a little bit more thin at wide receiver. There's still some options out there, you know. So I don't really have anybody at this point that I'm like, oh yeah, they got to go get this guy. But I do think they do need to, you know, try at least to put one or two guys on the roster. You know, it didn't really work out with Tony. It doesn't really seem to be working out with Sky Moore. You know, they can add through the draft. I get that, but you know, they're going to have some other holes to fill through the draft. So I'm hoping a wide receivers in their future. What do you think, Jim?
You know, like Dan, those are my two targets. It was Mooney, it was Samuel. But now, all right, now we know they'll have very little money to spend. I think the cheapest addition that they could make, maybe even close to minimum salary. He played 15 games last year, long injury history. DJ Chark. I think DJ Chark would be a player who, if they can manage the snaps, don't overwork him, but he could give them a presence on the perimeter they currently don't have. And the second one, if this player doesn't get signed and the money goes down, Marquise Brown, if he could get a team-friendly deal, that would work. I would not take a flyer on Mike Williams, even though he's always dominated an Arrowhead when he's played that team. But if he goes bargain basement because of the ACL and he like literally can't get a contract, at that point, if you were going to get him for peanuts, that would be fine. But otherwise, I wouldn't pay him any real money.
I like those options. I especially like the Hollywood Brown. I think that, I think if they're creative with how they work it, they can still fit a Hollywood signing or anybody like that. I think they got about 12 mil in space right now, and they can they can arrange things so they've got a signing bonus that's spread out and all of that. But Bradley, what are you thinking? You got any particularly hot players?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, you guys have hit on the especially the Hollywood Brown one. I was like, oh, I hope they don't say Hollywood Brown because I really wanted that one. But Jim and I are on the same wavelength. I will say one thing about the Kansas City Chiefs, though. A big winner as of right now is Isaiah Pacheco. Given all of the shifts that we've seen in the running back position, all of the running backs that is signed for a lot of money, it was very prudent of the Kansas City Chiefs to not sign a running back and to just continue to ride with Pacheco. He's been pretty healthy over the last couple seasons that he's been on the Chiefs, and maybe they do give a little bit of insurance in the draft. I could see them taking an early day 3 selection, maybe something like that. Maybe a player who falls a little bit. We'll see how teams are approaching like Jonathan Brooks, although I think that, the Dallas Cowboys, if I'm picking a team, will be going after Brooks. But I think the Chiefs, with regard to the Chiefs, the big winner there out of free agency is Isaiah Pacheco. And I think also Rashee Rice. Like Rice has come along. He crushed, in the second half of the season when they gave him full complement of snaps, and he still maintained his efficiency. The PFF receiving grade, yards per route run were all great in the second half of the season. And so I think those were the big winners for them. So I don't think that there's really much they need to address now that free agency dust is settled.
Are we a little worried about Pacheco, though? He has stayed healthy. But remember, in the off season 2 years ago, hand and shoulder surgeries. They took a long time to recover. He didn't miss time, but he got banged up. Last year, he had that shoulder surgery, missed only a game, but he's a high-impact runner. He doesn't have the body for that. Yep. He's been fortunate that his injuries have come at points in time where he was able to, it worked out. But honestly, the more carries he gets with his running style, he does not have a long shelf life unless he gets a compliment. Am I wrong on that?
No, I think you're spot on there, and that's why I think they will address the run, because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not the answer. Jerick McKinnon ultimately is too old, and if they're saving him for the playoffs, that's not going to work. So maybe you do want, a pass-catching back out of the backfield or between the tackles, right? At least somebody to fit a role player for the Chiefs. I think that would be a good fit for them early day 3. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good fit. I think they're going to definitely delve into, a day 3 guy here. Another way they could go is they could do just a cheap signing of like a Donta Foreman, who would give them, like a backup of just the 2-down pounder that they might not be able to get otherwise. So that would be a fun one.
A 2-down pounder. I love it. It's the new menu item on McDonald's, And
here's one more just interesting one for wide receiver for the Chiefs. KJ Osborne. He would be fun, I think, with Patrick Mahomes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We saw some spike weeks, when he was with Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. So, especially if you are tied to, because this is a best ball show, Jim. So we're going to have to, put that spin on as we're going through. But I do think, given the history of KJ Osborne, that's a really nice call there, Dan.
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun. I mean, he is perfectly suited for best ball. He's not a guy you're going to feel great about starting in a, seasonal managed league. But when you don't have to worry about when his big games are coming, then that's totally perfect for him.
Andy Reid would love him. He blocks his tail off.
Yes,
That's why, because last year people are like, Jordan Addison seeing less snaps. Yes, because KJ Osborne blocks his behind off, and they need that in their offense. So you're right. He would get a big role, and those spike weeks would come in the weeks where Mahomes tends to target him. That's a great call.
I love it. Dan and Jim are bringing the fire. The two down grinder.
Yes.
I love
2 down pounder.
2 down pounder. There we go. Fantastic. We will move to the south. The Dallas Cowboys are our next team that we will take a look at. They've been stuck in neutral so far, despite the fact that Jerry Jones has said they want to go all in. I don't think Jerry understands what all in means. Maybe he shouldn't be playing poker in Vegas. I don't know. I'm going all in, guys. I got one chip. Look, maybe it's the punter or the long snapper that they were able to sign, but nevertheless, they're stuck in this neutral. They have what? Malik Davis and Rico Dowdle as their running backs right now. Tony Pollard signing with the Tennessee Titans. Zeke is still out there in the fringe free agent. Maybe he makes a return, but for right now, without an extension for Dak, cap funds are slim. Who can the Dallas Cowboys target after getting ousted in round 1 against my beloved Green Bay Packers? Jim, Dan, anyone want to
Dan's going to recycle a name. Dan, recycle a name you already used because that's their winner.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Donta Foreman. that's got to be it. I mean, they actually could cobble something together with him, but there's not much left in the free agent market for running back. It's really kind of amazing. Everybody's talking about how running back is devalued, but when all of a sudden all these teams have an extra $30 million to spend that they weren't really counting on, guess where's the first luxury place that they use those funds? I got a little extra pocket cash. I'm gonna, I'm not gonna just take the sirloin. I'm going for the ribeye here. So that's that.
Do you guys realize the last 10 Super Bowl winners, the lead back has made 1.2% of the salary cap or less on each of those teams?
I did not realize that. That's a great stat.
Man,
I love it.
That is. That's fantastic. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it seems like Jerry Jones has been doing his best, this may be politically incorrect, but Mitch McConnell impersonation.
Oh, boy. Just frozen there. Just
frozen. Loading.
oh, my gosh. That's fabulous.
So, I think, probably getting something done for Dak is going to, open up some funds and everything. But until then, they really don't seem to have a lot to spend.
One name in the running back streets that we haven't mentioned so far is Damian Harris. He's a Buffalo Bills running back formerly. And so I wonder if he's going to get a role somewhere. Injured last year. There was a lot of buzz when he signed with Buffalo last year. We thought it was going to be James Cook, Damian Harris, and now maybe he lands. He's a sneaky player that we can take really late because he's not being drafted very often in the best ball streets. And if he's still hanging out with some of the running back needy teams like Dallas who could sign him super cheap, that's a player that we could also put on your radar here.
That's a great call. I like that one.
It was a neck injury, right? And it was earlier in the season, and there was never a whisper about him coming back. No. That gets me a little nervous. I mean, it's a great call, Bradley, for sure, because if he's back to where he was, he'd be a fantastic fit. But the fact that it was a neck injury, we heard nothing. I wonder how severe it was.
Yeah, that could be worrisome. He was supposedly, wasn't he healthy? Like, he was injured, and then he made his way back, and then he was healthy, but never actually hit the field, right?
Yeah, that could be. I mean, I didn't really follow him that close. Once you hit injured reserve, kind of until I start hearing noise that the team is getting ready to bring him back. I don't pay a ton of attention. So yeah. I'll have to look into that. That's an interesting thought.
One we can dive a little deeper in. We'll also continue to dive deep, but before we do, we have a word from the Podfather and the Dynasty Dominator app.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add Superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
That's right. It is well worth it. Get the Dynasty Dominator app today. Crush your Dynasty leagues. I'm in a Dynasty startup right now, a 32-teamer. It's wild. It's one of those. Oh, yeah, it's crazy, guys. I got to do, is mix it up a little bit. Best ball, Dynasty, keep it fresh. But it's great. But a Dynasty that's not really hitting very hard anymore is the Denver Broncos. They've been struggle busting over the last few years. Right now, it's Jarrett Stidham because Russell Wilson has a post-June 1st designation and is going to cost a fat chunk of change against the Broncos cap for them to, pay him but not play him. So Jarrett Stidham is he has a big fan in Sean Payton. And I thought maybe, Taysom Hill will get cut and maybe Hill will move to the Denver Broncos. That's like my long shot deep call. But are they really going to just roll with Jarrett Stidham? Are they going to bring in competition? Is a rookie on the horizon? Dan, Jim, what are we thinking for the Denver Broncos heading into the month and a half before the draft?
Yeah, so I think, they're probably looking pretty hard at a rookie, one way or another, and they may think they're going to be fine with Stidham and a rookie. And the longer they go without signing anybody, I think the more likely that is. And what they feel, I think there's a lot of talk about, teams are going to have to trade up for J.J. McCarthy, and I don't really know if they're going to really have to do that or not. If they did, it would be like the first time I think ever that there's been 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 picks that have been taken, which is, this class seems good, but probably not that good. So my guess is somebody's going to fall. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Will Levis was going to be, top of the first round pick. So I'm smelling smoke here somewhere, and I don't know which of these quarterbacks the smoke is around and all of that, but so there are teams definitely throwing out smoke screens. I don't know, like the Vikings supposedly are so hot for McCarthy as well. I don't know why the Vikings would want to let that get out, if that's really the case. So I don't know, maybe the Vikings have something else in mind, but I think Denver and the Vikings, they're probably the two teams that are most likely kind of looking at each other, trying to gun for that last guy that's available, and where are they going to have to take him, and so it's going to be an interesting lead into the draft. Thoughts on that, Jim?
I remember Sean Payton. It was a long time ago. There was a second-round pick of Miami. This quarterback who had a bum shoulder. He didn't think he could pass a test. And then all of a sudden we see Payton trade for him. Oh, it's Drew Brees. Wait a minute. This dude's a Hall of Famer. So my guess is maybe there are traits of a quarterback that's not an elite quarterback in the class that Payton thinks he could mold. It won't be Drew Brees, of course, but mold into what Payton wants in his system. I imagine if that's the case, then Stidham is a 1-year stopgap, which is going to be good enough, but they're not going to make the playoffs, so that's going to be is what it is, but they'll at least be able to be functional. But yes, I think that's got to be the grand plan. They probably don't want Stidham as their quarterback, but like you mentioned earlier, with what they're paying Wilson, they got to punt this season to a degree.
Which is so unfortunate, because at least make yourself competitive, or you're just going for the 101 for next year. Maybe that is the grand master plan, but then you've spent You've spent first-round picks to get Russell Wilson. Then you spent first-round picks to get Sean Payton. And then now you're intentionally tanking a year just so you can get a good first-round pick in the following year. Like, this is dynasty mismanagement, franchise mismanagement at its finest. So Denver Broncos are in a lot of trouble, I think, at least over the next couple of years. And I'm not sure if Sean Payton has the patience to be able to handle this. He's already had to deal with the Russell Wilson situation. Now he has to go through. It's not going to be probably till year 4 that he's competitive. Is he going to have the patience for it? I'm not convinced. So we'll see how long Sean Payton will last in the Denver Broncos. Nevertheless, we will continue moving on. We got a couple more teams, and then we're going to go into some nitty-gritty free agent signings. The Miami Dolphins, their defense absolutely gutted during free agency, and they've been cash strapped. They don't have a lot of movement with some big contracts, and the anticipation of Tua Tagovailoa getting extended, that's a very strong possibility. Jim, Dan, is this a reset year, and how will this affect the team fantasy-wise in 2024? Just the major pick is Jonnu Smith, right? That was their big free agent signing splash. So I don't know. I'm a little worried about the Dolphins.
Yep, definitely. And when it comes to that, one of the things I saw early on when I was taking my first look through is, like how far the Dolphins had to go to get cap compliant, and what kind of players they were likely to lose and everything else. And I was like, you know what, Raheem Mostert is still golden. I do expect Achane to take over a lot more, but I think you can draft Mostert confidently where he's going in best balls. Because I just don't see them adding anybody except maybe through the draft, and they've got enough other holes to fill through the draft that they may, go very, very cheap at running back. So I think that, we're looking at pretty much status quo on the offense, other than the fact that if they've got a worse defense, it's going to put more pressure on the offense to score some points. So, that's not a bad thing for fantasy either. Jim, your thoughts?
The defense was interesting. So they lose Van Ginkel, but Shaq Barrett is honestly the same player right now at this stage of his career. And they didn't lose a corner, but they pick up Kendall Fuller, which that was a solid ad. They lose safety Brandon Jones, who wasn't very good. Jordan Poyer, even aging, is an upgrade on him at this point. So they did lose Christian Wilkins. All right, that one, it's going to sting. I get that. And, oh, man, the dude from the Achilles, Jalen Phillips. Now, if he hasn't come back, that's going to hurt. But they really did a nice job of patching up some of those losses in free agency. So I give them that. But in terms of the offense, it's good. Dan, you're right. It's going to be Mostert's the value pick. I don't think that Tua is going to be able to keep being managed by his coach, because each of the first 2 years they've been together. The beginning of the year, they come out with something beautiful. The league can't stop. The league steals the concepts. They use them, which means they learn to play defense against them. And then by the second half of the season, all of a sudden Tua has nothing because McDaniel doesn't have an in-season counterpunch. And his arm is a real problem. He cannot make the downfield throws. He underthrows Tyreek Hill, and it's not intentional. That's because he can't get the ball there. So Dan's on it. The running game's going to have to click. They did lose Robert Hunt. That was a big loss on the interior, but they can, with the scheme, they can overcome that. And I know a lot of people are really hot on Achane. Mostert's so late in drafts, that's the value. And not quite sure what Achane is yet. He had those incredible games early, and then as he played a little bit more, we didn't quite see that anymore because, remember, the Dolphins have been a little bit figured out by then.
Yeah, agree that Mostert is that value. He's running back 29, being drafted 96th overall, despite the fact that he was a top 5 running back in terms of best ball value rating last year. And then, Jim and Dan, just to put an exclamation mark on it, Tua Tagovailoa last year was quarterback 23 in best ball value rating. Quarterback 23. He was not giving you the spike weeks. Just to give you a sampling of who had a higher best ball value rating, Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, okay, Sam Howell, Jake Browning, okay, higher best ball value ratings per game. It just not hitting ceiling weeks. And when his floor hit, it was a scary floor. And so if Tyreek Hill, who's getting older, how many times last year? It had to have been 5 or 6 times that Tyreek Hill got hurt during the game, got some massages on the sidelines, came back in, and still got like 7 for 115 and a touchdown, and like salvaged his fantasy game and his fantasy week. But he did not really salvage Tua, because when he was out, Tua was struggling to get it to Jalen Waddle, and there was no like third passing option in this offense. So we have concerns about Tua as a long-term asset, and even as a short-term best ball asset, probably not a value when you're drafting him like quarterback 15 or so. That's not going to get it done for us. When you want spike weeks from those type of guys, it's Tyreek who's dragging Tua, not Tua who's elevating Tyreek. So definitely a situation worth monitoring. The last situation that we're monitoring, Jim and Dan, it seems like there's a new story every week coming out of Chicago. I mean, Jim, you are at the heart and soul of it. You are centered in Chicago. You understand more than anybody how conflicted the Bears fan base is about, are we going to keep Justin Fields? Are we going to trade Justin Fields? Are we going to keep both of them? Are we going to trade the 101? How will this Justin Fields saga end? Jim, you are at the heart of this. What is the beat that you're getting right now?
All right, this is beyond that. It's a crystal ball, and I do think this is going to happen. So right now, the Bears had a cold market for Fields, and they didn't really want to give him up for that. Ultimately, they have to. If it's a second rounder or a third, they will. But here's what's going to be: draft day, because Minnesota has Sam Darnold. Do they really want to go with him as a starter? No, but they have a hedge. So if they can't make a trade up on draft day, then they might look to the Bears. They might look for Fields. The Raiders are in the same boat. Gardner Minshew. Again, you don't really want him as your full season starter. So I think they position themselves. They're desperate. They can. If again, on draft day, if they can't move up, they might go Fields. Finally, and this is a long shot, and I doubt this one happens, if the Giants are desperate enough, Brian Dable needs somebody to throw the football, and it certainly isn't Daniel Jones, and I don't know that they can make that happen. But if I'm the Bears, remember the Bears, they fleeced DJ Moore away from Carolina. If I'm calling New York, I'm talking trade, I want Kayvon Thibodeau, or I want their only offensive lineman who's good, Andrew Thomas. I want them to give one of those pieces. So I do think the deal gets done on draft day.
Jim, do you think that they can get that much for Justin Fields?
Desperation. If those teams are, if both Minnesota and Las Vegas and even New York, if they feel that their only chance to compete is to have a quarterback, and they realize on draft day they cannot trade up to get one of those three, which seems unlikely to me because the top three teams need a quarterback, desperation drives deals. I may be wrong on this, but I think especially Minnesota, you got Justin Jefferson, you got Jordan Addison, maybe October or November, you got TJ Hawkinson back, and you got Sam Darnold. He'll have been figured out after 3 weeks. So, like I said, if the desperation is the only thing the Bears have going for them, but I think they will settle if they have to and give because they need him out. They can't have the number 1 pick looking over his shoulder at Fields. They can't have that. So that's my take.
I think that's probably the most important thing is what you just said. They cannot have Fields on that team when, really in training camp or anything. I mean, if Fields is still around, they're going to have to do like San Francisco did with Garoppolo, where the guy's just kind of working off to the side and everybody knows, he's not part of this team because Fields is just too darn popular with the rest of the team. I mean, so that makes it so they've got to make it clear if, they bring in Caleb Williams, here's our guy, this is our guy, and Justin Fields is not going to be part of this. Otherwise, it's just going to be a house divided, which we don't want to see for sure. Bradley, your thoughts?
I think, Jim, you're right. Drive up the value because there wasn't like a hard deadline. Like the Atlanta Falcons got who they wanted in Kirk Cousins. We'll talk about Kirk Cousins here momentarily. But the fact that Atlanta got Kirk Cousins and then all the other dominoes for Atlanta fell into place, I think that took away perhaps the biggest suitor. And the other teams were not as desperate at that point to be getting a quarterback because there was no real quarterback market outside of Kirk Cousins. Like it's Cousins and then Russell Wilson, who has been traded away by the Seahawks, cut by the Denver Broncos, Gardner Minshew, Sam Darnold, Sam Howell. Like there's not. It was Kirk Cousins and everyone else. So the supply was very low, and I think that the supply increasing up until draft day. Jim, you hit the nail on the hammer, nail with the hammer. However Billy Muzio puts it, you nailed it. The reality is that we're gonna get here in about 6 weeks. We're gonna find out that these teams are actually. I like your call about the New York Giants. I think there is more fire to the smoke of the New York Giants not being happy with Daniel Jones, and they're gonna have to address a lot of pieces. So it might be I wouldn't be surprised, like multi-team trade or like try to get multiple pieces involved. But the Giants also have a lot of work, not just at quarterback, but also at receiver, because it's Wan'Dale Robinson. And that's it. Like Darren Waller, who might retire. The Giants have a lot of needs. And so maybe they get up to draft day and they're like, well, Daniel Jones maybe has a mark. Maybe there's someone else who wants Daniel Jones. So I wonder if there's going to be some movement by the Giants, because they've got a lot of work to do to be competitive here. So that's my take on Justin Fields. I think we are going to see more movement here as we get closer at the end of April. All right. We've gone through it enough. We've gone through the overview of a few of the teams. Now we're going to get into some of the nitty gritty. Our favorite, we're going to hit on some of our favorites. I see there are some highlighted in the show sheet. I'm also going to throw some names. We have to talk about Kirk Cousins, right? Atlanta Falcons signs. It's auto upgrade for every player, but there's also been some interesting players added to the Atlanta Falcons as well. It's not just Kirk Cousins, who signs a $180 million deal with $100 million guaranteed for 4 years. It's also that Mooney signs. It's also that we have, who else signed? Like
they got Rondale Moore today.
Rondale Moore just traded today. Like there are other pieces, not just Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So the quarterback market for Kirk Cousins, the underdog ADP has risen from quarterback 20 to quarterback 18. I think he can get into quarterback 15 to 12, like that range here in the next couple weeks. How high can Kirk Cousins ADP get given the weapons that we know are on Atlanta? Bijan Robinson, I didn't even mention him yet. All of these weapons in Atlanta, and we will have a hopefully functional NFL offense, not run by Arthur Smith. Dan, Jim, how are we approaching Kirk Cousins going into 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cousins is probably, he's moving from one really nice offense to another. There are some concerns that knock him down a little bit from where he was with Minnesota for me. Just number one, that, he's got the Achilles, and that's on his plant foot. And, so that worries me a little bit. And he's also, it is a familiar style of offense, but it's not the same offense. He's got to learn that new offense. He's got to learn new players. There's going to be a learning curve there. But overall, I mean, there is hardly a softer place that he could have landed. So we definitely like that. And, Drake London, everybody is rightfully, pushing him up draft boards. They're pushing up Pitts up draft boards. And I think Mooney is kind of a fun add, too, because he, we think of him as a slot guy, but a couple of years ago when he got 140 targets for the Bears, he was playing on the outside as much or more than anything else. So, he kind of comes in there a little bit in the, if you want to throw a Minnesota flavor on it, he comes in there a little bit in the Jordan Addison role. And so I think that's going to be very, very interesting. Where he's going in the underdog drafts is it's late. I'm not sure. Let's see, wide receiver 79. So wow, that's definitely and especially with the fact that in best ball we want those spike weeks. I think he's a spike week guy. So that's a bet I've been making early and often because I figured he was going to end up somewhere better anyway. And the fact that he ended up in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins is just phenomenal.
When you mentioned Mooney, And you correctly mentioned 2 years, was it 3 years ago at this point, when he had the 1,055 yards. He was on the outside. He was winning routes on each level of the field. Defenses were actually keying on him by week 12, and it didn't matter. He was still getting done. There was a big rain game against Arizona where his numbers were low, and there was nobody who was going to move the ball that day. But the last 2 years, it's not Mooney's fault that the offense was dysfunctional, the coaching was dysfunctional. Justin Fields was putting in a horrible spot in terms of how to distribute the ball. They were making him think too much. This is a great spot. Mooney, sub 4.4 speed. You put him, like you said, along on the outside alongside Drake London, who's going to obviously draw the big attention. Pitts has been criminally misused, not just usage, 99th percentile average depth of target. It was this big menu of deep shots. They didn't give him any underneath stuff. On this offense, he'll eat. The biggest point, though, is Zach Robinson. Zach Robinson comes in, and look, he wants that Ram-style offense, right? And the Rondale Moore, look, last year he played 17 games. The numbers weren't good. But you know how much motion, pre-snap, that the offenses of the Rams had used. Zach Robinson wants to bring that in. Talk about a pre-snap motion guy, Rondale Moore. Some toss sweeps just to get the defense like moving and out of position. That could be really helpful. But I think put us all together, and you guys mentioned Bijan, this offense has the ability to explode. It might take some time to gel, but I think some of those basic tenets, those are going to give defenses fits.
Definitely. It's a dangerous offense because they can win anywhere. We love the Curtis Samuel signing with the Bills. That's a lot of motion. That's a lot of movement. But the Rondale Moore, I loved him coming out of Purdue, second round pick. We remember he was just undersized, 5'7", 180, but great speed, just bad speed score because, when you're that small, you better be moving that fast. But he's got speed to burn, and when you've got a lot of different weapons like London, the Alpha, the X, you've got a difference maker downfield with Pitts, you've got speed with Mooney, you've got motion with Rondell, you got Bijan who can do everything, catch the ball out of the backfield. Bijan was one of the best receiving backs in the class, and so the reality is like they're going to win everywhere. And so ultimately, if Kirk Cousins can win himself, if he can just take care of himself, then I think we're going to be looking. Drake London has already jumped from wide receiver 24 to wide receiver 19 in the last week. So the steam is hot. The steam is hot for Atlanta.
The caveat is, one or two of these guys are liable to underperform, the lofty expectations we're laying out here. But it's not necessarily obvious who it's going to be, So yes. When you're building your best ball portfolio, don't just major on Drake London or Kyle Pitts or whatever. Sprinkle in a healthy dose of some of the other guys. Vary it up a little bit so that you, hopefully you got a couple 3 teams where you really catch the lightning in a bottle and catch exactly the right guys.
All right, we'll keep her moving with the quarterback position. There's one other quarterback we want to talk about, and that is Russell Wilson. Danger Russ was being drafted as quarterback 30 way back at the end of February, now up to quarterback 28. We know where he's landed. It's in Pittsburgh. We expect that he's going to be the starter. I know there was a lot of chatter before Russ signed that Kenny Pickett's going to be the quarterback one, blah, blah, blah. No, it's going to be Russ. He's much better than Pickett. Pickett can't throw touchdowns to save his life. So Russ now with just George Pickens, but we heard earlier this week Arthur Smith having conversations with Brock Bowers. We'll see what happens there. But this is a team that I think no. Well, it's going to be Brock Bowers throwing touchdowns to Pat Freiermuth. That's what it is. Right. The Jonnu Smith role. Lord have mercy. I don't think Russ is going to be great for fantasy. Just my take on it. It's going to be lower pass volume. You've got one guy with Deontay Johnson now traded. And I love George Pickens. He's going to have his spike weeks, but I think that the floor is also going to be scary still for Pickens. But he's still cheap enough that we're not going to be hurt too much by it. I just think that, there's not really a pathway for Russ to pay off, like getting you to quarterback 12. At this spot. So he's more of an avoid for me, given the lack of ceiling. Like, give me Will Levis at about that spot instead of Russell Wilson?
I highlighted Wilson because I want to talk about Pickens. And the whole thing I'm seeing here is Russell Wilson, as soon as Sean Payton realized he had him, right away he brings in Ben Powers, the guard. He brings in Colt McKivitz, the tackle. They were run blockers. And they added to the tight end room. So you knew right away, oh, he's going to hide Russell Wilson. And Payton did a nice job hiding him. But we still saw Cortland Sutton eat. And that was positive. The play action was above average. Well, Arthur Smith, we know that's going to be top 4, top 3. The play action to get dialed up. And think back to Ryan Tannehill back in those Tennessee days with Arthur Smith. And I'm not comparing George Pickens to A.J. Brown, but remember those play action, those slants, intermediate slants. Wilson can make those middle of the field over the linebacker throws. It's under the linebackers where he can't make those throws. But this is a kind of a natural fit. This is actually a boost on what Cortland Sutton was for Wilson, because the way you could deploy Pickens will work much better with the play action. So I think that's the big winner in this deal. And obviously the running game is going to continue to cook. But you're right. Wilson's not going to be a top 15 fantasy quarterback. His running is not nearly what it was. He's like 4.2 yards per carry, and it showed. Doesn't have that athleticism, but Pickens is the big winner.
Yeah, I'll push back a little bit on Pickens just because of the volume. We've never seen any wide receiver with Arthur Smith get more than 117 targets, which I think Pickens got 110 last year, if I remember right. That's off the top of my head, but I think it's right around there. So
yeah, he just edged over 100. It was barely over 100.
So, and okay. And yes, we've got Deontay Johnson gone, but, they're going to have another wide receiver in there, and they're going to use the running backs. They're going to use Freiermuth. They're
Tyler Boyd, maybe?
Tyler Boyd, yeah, exactly. And so my concern with Pickens is, I don't think Pickens is going to suck. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people out there who are putting a lot of ceiling on Pickens, and I just don't see a huge ceiling there.
The target call is very good because even A.J. Brown, 105, there might be a couple numbers right around there. And he did miss some games, so there is that as well, where his numbers might have been a little high. But you're right. There has always been a cap on those targets. I think with Wilson's big arm, and I don't disagree with you, Dan. I think that's an excellent point about the targets. I think the ability of big plays, because A.J. Brown, when he even played 12, 13 games, he could put up big numbers on those 106 targets. Again, I'm not saying they're the same player, but the explosion in that game, and I really believe Wilson, in terms of getting the ball to that level, might have been better than Tannehill. But again, great point on the target ceiling.
Right, yeah, Pickens is going to get there through efficiency, not through volume. It's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, the bulldog. Yes. The bulldog will bulldoze his way to the end zone.
I love me some Pickens. I mean, he's one of my favorite players just because he does have that dog in him. But he's a lot of fun to watch. I like players that are they get their emotions into the game, and they're serious about it. I mean, you watch some of the stuff he did at Georgia. It's like, my God, that guy was blocking guys through the end zone and out the back. So. He's a fun player to watch, so I'm wishing good things for him.
He is a fun player to watch, fun player to root for, fun player to draft in best ball. We're going to move to the running back position, though, and Josh Jacobs signs with the Green Bay Packers, a 4-year, $48 million deal. Most of it is just guaranteed in the first year, but there's a lot of options and lots of back-end money. It's not as big as 4 years, 48 actually sounds. He's being drafted right now as the running back 10 on Underdog Fantasy, 42nd overall, so mid-4th round pick. And so that puts him outside of contention for 0 RB builds. But you were able to get Josh Jacobs at the 5-6 turn in early March, end of February. And he was definitely a player that I was clicking at that 5-6 turn, like when he was 60. But since he signed with the Packers have cut Aaron Jones, who's now signed with the Minnesota Vikings. And the Packers just today used a restricted 4th-year tender. If I'm looking at this correctly, it's so rare. I had to do a double check.
They pulled a Bill Belichick.
AJ Dillon is returning to the Green Bay Packers, but the clear priority here is Josh Jacobs. And Jacobs, a player who has been through coaching tumult during his time with the Raiders, but with a Packers team that is ascending and has the youngest wide receiver core in the NFL and the cheapest wide receiver core in the NFL, by the time that they need to sign some of these guys, Jacobs will be on his way out and they can recycle through. I think this is a smart move. And I think Jacobs' ADP is going to continue to rise into probably mid-round 3. I don't know if we'll get to round 2 given the existence still of A.J. Dillon. But what are y'all's take on Josh Jacobs given the Packers?
Yeah, I think Jacobs is a really nice fit for the Packers. I like the fact that they've got a guy who can do it all, and with Dillon, I think, with them coming back, he's going to be more of a, really a guy who's just there to give Jacobs a blow every now and then rather than, kind of this 1A, 1B thing that they were trying to do with Aaron Jones. At least I hope that's what the case is. Because, Dillon just really hasn't shown enough juice. Around the goal line, fine, but, I'm kind of hoping that Jacobs will hold on to that role as well, and they will, again, just use kind of Dillon as a breather back. So I like the Jacobs signing. I think he's got a good couple of years there. I really like that it pushed Aaron Jones over to the Vikings, being a Vikings fan a little bit, so... Don't mind that at all. We've never been shy about cleaning up the leftovers on the Green Bay plate when they when they turn up their nose, because they don't recognize that the meal is still good. It's just it's getting close to the date of expiration, but it hasn't quite passed. So I love Jacobs there. And the thing is with all the wide receivers there, you never know who it's going to be from week to week. But Jacobs is a guy you can count on every week. So he's fantastic for, the managed leagues as well.
I'm a little worried about it because they make the move to bring in Jacobs and get rid of Jones. To me, it was an age thing. You go from a 29-year-old back to a 26. Well, they had Aaron Jones when he was 26 with Matt LaFleur, and yet he would never give him enough work. And it's not like Aaron Jones size-wise couldn't theoretically handle it. A.J. Dillon got worse every single year. And unfortunately for Aaron Jones, Dillon missed those last few games of the season, and he got that full workload. But they stubbornly kept giving Dillon the ball. And if it's not him, my guess is it's somebody else. But I am very concerned that the Aaron Jones treatment is going to go to Josh Jacobs. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what their history has shown. Now, Jacobs himself, we know the career year he had 2 years ago, and that was the year the Raiders didn't pick up his fifth-year option. And look, he was pissed that year. You could tell. He trained up for that season thinking he was playing for a contract. If you take the 3 years that surround the 4.9 yard per carry career year, 3.84 yards in those 3. But let's even go back to last year. Broken tackle rate, 40th percentile. Yards after contact, 33rd percentile. He's a very good receiver. Definitely that. But those numbers were a little bit scary, and I'm still very worried about how Matt LaFleur's going to do things. I hope you're right, Dan. I hope they decide we were wrong with Aaron Jones, and they're going to use him. I'm worried about it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. The volume has to be there for Jones. I mean, that's part of the whole idea of how you use Josh Jacobs the best. You've got to have that volume there because otherwise he's a little bit more of a compiler and not a guy like Aaron Jones who can really break him.
Yeah, he comes for me like similar to David Montgomery, like between the tackles, grinder, can control the clock. Problem is Jacobs also has had issues staying healthy. There have been games he's missed 2, 3, 4, 5 games throughout his career, and so I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers also address the running back position in the draft as see if a value guy falls early day 3 once again. Given that this running back class is weak, we'll see if there's guys that can fit the scheme that the Packers want to run, because right now it's A.J. Dillon, it's Emmanuel Wilson, and not really anything else, behind Josh Jacobs. So Jacobs at running back 10, I agree, is a better managed league selection than a best ball selection at this time. We'll also move to Joe Mixon, who gets traded. He was going to get cut by the Cincinnati Bengals, and they're like, well, wait a minute. We're going to trade a 7th-round pick. The Houston Texans are running back 21. And Mixon this is an opportunity for him to continue. Like, my concern for Mixon, he was not an efficiency guy. He's never been an efficiency guy, never yards after contact per attempt, never a good yards per carry or expected yards carry guy, but he's gotten the goal line work and he can catch passes out of the backfield. And he is a veteran presence in the running game that is an improvement over the combo of Singletary and Dameon Pierce. So a guy you can trust who can handle all three downs. I think it's a good fit for the Houston Texans. And he's going to get the volume. And at running back 21, I'm happy with it. Jim, are you happy with it?
So I want to throw these numbers at you. Joe Mixon and Devin Singletary, okay? So Joe Mixon, last year, 49th percentile broken tackle rate. Singletary, 56th, beats him. Yards after contact, Mixon, 41st percentile. Oh, wait, Singletary's 44th. Now, yards after the catch, Mixon got a little edge. Mixon was 70th percentile, Singletary only 62nd. Now, they kind of look like the same player. Mixon's the great compiler. He has been the compiler for years. But I will say one thing. Mixon could sustain a little bit more offense than Singletary. Singletary's a little bit more boom bust. You might get the yardage, but it might be a 16-yard run and then a 1, a 2, and all of a sudden you're in trouble. So Mixon gives him a little more stability there. But that said, Singletary got 216 carries, 38 targets, and that's with Dameon Pierce for about 7 weeks, still having like substantial work. So this looks like another 300 touch season for Mixon, heavily used in the receiving game. So let's compile for another year and take him on our fantasy teams, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the running back 21 is what you've got him at, Bradley, for his ADP, and that's a smash. I've been smashing Mixon all the way, all offseason. And honestly, it's because I thought that Cincinnati, there was no way that he was going to cut him. It's like, why would you cut Mixon? You already cut his salary last year, and they're gearing up for one more run with Burrow before Burrow's contract gets really expensive. And so they tag Higgins, and it kind of looked like, let's get the gang all back together, run it back one more time since Burrow wasn't healthy the last year. And, like the last thing I would have thought was, oh, they're going to sign a Zach Moss and then cut, Mixon. It's like, they're going to save $2 million or something like that doing that. Mixon already knows the offense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me still. But, hey, Mixon found the softest place to land he possibly could have. So it still wheels up on Mixon. I'm still very, very happy to be very overweight on Mixon.
Yeah, Zach Moss, you mentioned, was back in February running back 49, now has jumped to running back 38 and continues to climb. I think that I was happy taking a lot of Zach Moss at the end of February, beginning of March, but I'm going to sell at this point. I'm avoiding back-end running back 3 just because there's a hard pathway for him to edge out enough work given what Chase Brown was able to show last year. Chase Brown, very electric, very dynamic, can catch the ball out of the backfield. One of the highest yards per route run of any running back last season. Yes, limited sample size, sure. But we saw the dynamism. I don't think Chase Brown can handle all of the touches, so it's going to be Moss, it's going to be Brown. But I'm going to sell Zach Moss at least this climb. I don't want him for right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. So Bradley, are you taking if you're in a draft and you've got both Moss and Brown on the board, you're taking Brown? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Jim?
Yeah, the pass catching ability. And, Zach Moss, I like Zach Moss. And 2 years ago, he had that last 4 games of the season when Indy wasn't cooking with their line, and he was like 4.9 per carry. And then last year when he subbed in the beginning of the year when Taylor was on the pup, he was very good. And then all of a sudden it's like, the glamour wore off. And he did get work, and then Taylor missed time. And Zach Moss looked more like the ordinary back. But Indy blocked it up well for the run. He's going to Cincinnati. I'm not optimistic about that line. I don't think the line's going to help Zach Moss a lot. I think they're going to need the receiving game of Chase Brown.
Totally agree. Totally.
Well, we kind of hit on Aaron Jones a little bit, but let's just give a quick synopsis. Running back 16 right now. He's risen a little bit given that he's got the role for Kevin O'Connell. We know O'Connell loves to throw the ball and to the running backs, and especially if TJ Hawkinson is not ready to roll at the beginning of the season, we could see 8 target games, 10 target games, maybe, for Aaron Jones out of the backfield. I mean, it's not going to be Josh Oliver. It's not going to be some of these other tight ends. It's going to be Aaron Jones. If the pendulum is swinging away from tight end target share, it's going to go to the running back target share. And especially given he's going to be a safety valve for whatever quarterback is going to be there in Minnesota, whether it's Sam Darnold, probably not, but maybe a quarterback. We'll see how that lands. But Aaron Jones is one of my favorite 0 RB targets, especially given his spike week potential we saw highlighted against the Dallas Cowboys this year.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And, what I like is, they've got Ty Chandler there who at some point is going to get a quarterback killed if they rely on him to pass block too much. So, and that's something that Jones can do well. So, that Jones is going to be in there on a lot of high-value touches. Chandler, though, he's got juice, so, they've got somebody who they can kind of, spell him with. Where if they're running or whatever, they're not going to lose, like a whole ton of juice off of what Aaron Jones is offering right now. So I think it's a really nice backfield combo. I was very excited to see the Vikings going immediately after Jones. I thought that was a shrewd move on their part. And I'm Aaron Jones, running back 16. I'm definitely in on him around there. If he starts creeping up around running back 13, 12, whatever, I'm probably starting to get out at that point. But running back 16, I think there's still a little bit upside there.
People worry about the durability, and he missed 6 games last year in parts of others. He played a full 17 in 2022. He was flirting with 1,500 yards and 7 touchdowns. Played 15 games the year before that, about 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's the deal. And here's the thing. We talked earlier about Josh Jacobs and my concern about, the Green Bay coaching that not giving all that work. Well, now Aaron Jones is getting paid 1 year, $7 million. He's 29. Minnesota has no reason to preserve him for 5 years. They can use him as much as they want. That's the nature of this game. I think that works in Jones' factor. I'm with you guys completely on that.
Great. This is great. Jim, we've got one more player we want to talk about, but before we do, make sure you guys are following Jim at Jim Coventry NFL on the X Machine. Dan at Overhyped Sleeper on the X Machine. I'm Djibouti Puns, an unserious user handle for serious analysis. We've got one wide receiver left that we want to talk about. Just signed today, Curtis Samuel with the Buffalo Bills. Absolutely wills up for the presumed wide receiver 2 on the Buffalo Bills. Every season that Curtis Samuel has at least 90 targets, he's finished at least as the wide receiver 48. Right now, he is wide receiver 75 on Underdog Fantasy. He is a spike week king, a great flex option all the time, especially in your best ball leagues. Love Curtis Samuel at that price. I expect his stock to get into the wide receiver 50s pretty quickly. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's Curtis Samuel is kind of an interesting case because, you look at him and Khalil Mack, and it's like kind of the same guy in a lot of ways, except that Curtis Samuel is much, much faster. But as far as like traditional wide receiver roles, they're both going to play the slot. And that's where the conundrum comes in because they've got to find enough snacks for these guys. And then you've also got Dalton Kincaid, who's going to be, kind of playing sort of the same role. And, then you end up with it's like, okay, well, Mac Hollins is your guy on the outside. He's really the guy who's taking over from Gabe Davis, which was and this was a great deal for Buffalo because they got Mac Hollins for a maximum of $3 million for 1 year, whereas Jacksonville paid Gabe Davis, $39 million over 3 years if he plays out the deal. And it's like, hey, deep should be cheap. That's the way it's supposed to work. You don't need to pay up for a deep threat. These are guys that you want to get for, like $6 million or less or whatever, and just, run them down the field. Half the time they're not even getting the ball. They're just running coverage off of somebody else or, pulling, they're just pulling people downfield. So I like getting back to Curtis Samuel. I like him in this offense if they do enough motion and everything else that they need to be doing. I think, Jim, you were talking about this online earlier, so I thought you fleshed it out pretty well. I'm going to turn it over to you. Let you talk a little bit about Curtis Samuel here.
Yeah, the concern was the lack of pre-snap motion. That's where Samuel thrives, right? You want to get him on the move. And even though Brady wasn't the coordinator the whole year, 28th in pre-snap motion. That is not going to work unless they change that. And Dan, you mentioned astutely about Shakir and Samuel both playing slot. Shakir played 78% slot last year, and Samuel with Washington played 70%. So what's the identity going to be? If you're not going to use Samuel as that movable chess piece, you're not going to quite maximize him. So now does the offense have enough creativity? Because it really is a Swiss Army knife that they can really have fun with. Now, his best year in Carolina, 2020, 105 targets, 19 carries. He puts up 757 yards. Not outrageous numbers, but still good floor, right? I just don't know how they're going to use Shakir and Samuel. And we'll repeat, if there's not an increase in pre-snap motion, it makes it very cloudy for me.
Still, I think a great value. Wide receiver, 75. Yes. We expect it. You're tied to the number one quarterback in terms of fantasy points. You're going to see Curtis Samuel rise. I don't think that the Bills are out on taking a wide receiver in the draft as well to push Mac Hollins on the outside. And so we'll see who wins in that slot battle. The former second-round pick or Khalil Shakir, late day 3 pick. We'll see what happens with that. Nevertheless, a lot of fun chatting it up with Jim and Dan. Jim, any other plugs you want to give as we close out the evening? It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Oh, it has been fabulous. Again, like you said, Bradley, just the X machine at Jim Coventry NFL. But if you're a baseball player, fantasy baseball, honestly, not because I work for them, RotoWire is the best baseball coverage on the planet. You want a couple free days to look at all of our great stuff? Just go to rotowire.com/Jim. No credit card needed, no shenanigans. Just check it out because if you're a baseball player, that's the place to be.
Dan, any last words tonight on Pie Day, Pie Night?
I do not have enough digits memorized to sufficiently comment on Pie Day or Pie Night, but this has been a fun free agency period. Fun show tonight. Really appreciate you guys talking. I just want to real quick, if we can take 30 seconds and just go through a couple guys. I'm going to say an ADP. Just say in or out, and that's it. Just in or out. Do we have time to do that, Brad, for
I'm
2
good.
minutes?
If
okay.
Jim, you're good, I'm good.
All right, let's Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 35. Brad?
I'm in.
Jim?
Out.
I think I'm out as well. Gabe Davis, wide receiver 60.
It's so cheap, but I'm out.
I'm out as well.
I'm kind of with Jim. I'm like, it hurts to say, but I'm out. Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 43. Brad?
I'm in.
I'm in as well. If you could get the ball to Thielen, you could get the ball to Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, totally in. I think that's a steal. We were just talking about him. Mac Hollins, wide receiver 118. I think I know the answer here, but Brad?
I mean, sure, yeah. Especially in your Josh Allen builds, yes.
Yes.
In.
Okay. Good deal. All right. I just wanted to hit a few of those wide receivers because I thought we had some fun ones there. So, okay. Now we can close out the show, Brad. Thank you for indulging me.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of Dan and Jim, I'm Bradley. Until next time, good luck in the best ball streets, everybody.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.